Welcome, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Join us today in our podcast, Conversations with My Wife. Today we have a very special episode, a little different than usual. We have an intimate look into an actual therapy session between Leena, my wonderful, beautiful wife, and her therapist. Tune in and listen to the end, as there's a wild, thought provoking, perhaps even taboo surprise. Enjoy.
Now let's begin. This is our 20th session. How are you today, Leena?
Hi there. I'm doing okay, I suppose. Just the usual swirl of emotions, I guess. The kids are keeping me busy and, there's always something to handle at work. It sometimes feels like I'm juggling 1,000 things at once. It's a bit overwhelming. But yeah, I'm holding up. How about you?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. Last session, we were discussing your relationship with alcohol. You were expressing to me that you wanted to make some changes. Have you had any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot actually. I know it's not good to rely on alcohol to loosen up or have a good time, and I certainly don't want to make a fool of myself at parties. It's just sometimes, it feels like a quick way to just escape and not worry about all the tensions, especially between Patrick and me, even if it's just for a little while. But yeah, I realize it's probably better in the long run to find healthier ways to cope, not just for me, but for the kids too. It's just a bit hard to break that habit, especially when Lucy and I get together. We used to have our little wine nights, But I am committed to working on it, definitely. I've even been considering attending some kind of support group or something to help me stay on track. Do you think that's a good idea?
Ah, yes, Lucy. Your very best friend. Now, I suppose it's important to try and figure out what your long-term objectives are. Do you think eliminating alcohol completely is a goal you would like to attain?
I don't know about completely eliminating it. That seems a bit drastic maybe. I mean, I enjoy a good glass of wine or a cocktail now and then. But I definitely want to have a healthier relationship with alcohol, where it isn't this thing I use to escape or avoid my problems, I think setting some boundaries for myself could be a good start, like limiting how much I drink at parties or only drinking on special occasions. It might help me to not go overboard and end up regretting it later. It's important to me to find a balance where I can enjoy myself without it getting out of hand. I guess the goal is to be more mindful and in control, if that makes sense.
Yes, I could see how having two layers could certainly be a very helpful strategy, Leena.
I think a tolerable boundary might be having a glass of wine or a beer during a casual get-together or dinner. It's something that I enjoy, and as long as I can keep it to a minimum, it should be okay. As for a non-tolerable boundary, I feel strongly that getting to the point of being drunk, especially in public settings like parties, should be off limits. I've embarrassed myself enough times to know that it's just not worth it, and it doesn't help with the problems at home. So, I guess to put it clearly, a tolerable boundary could be one drink, and a non-tolerable boundary would be avoiding getting drunk to the point of losing control. Does that sound reasonable?
I would say that is absolutely a good start. But how are you going to be able to determine when you're at a risk of breaking boundary number 2? We're looking for something more concrete here. Some people say if they notice that they're getting loud, or at the first sign that they've disturbed someone, that is where they draw the line.
You're right, it needs to be more concrete to actually work. Thinking about it, I reckon a concrete sign for me might be when I start feeling that buzz, when I start to feel slightly tipsy. That's usually a warning signal that I am getting close to having too much. At that point, I should switch to water or a non-alcoholic drink to prevent myself from going any further. Another sign could be if I notice myself getting overly sarcastic or using that dry humor of mine to an extent where it might hurt someone's feelings or get too inappropriate. It's a slippery slope once I get going, so reining it in early would be key. So, yeah, committing to stop drinking at the first signs of being tipsy, or if I notice my humor going too far, that could be a strong line to draw to prevent crossing into that non-tolerable boundary. What do you think?
I have to say, I really appreciate you going into this somewhat challenging line of questioning. I think you're doing a really good job for you. What is the first sign that you've gone too far with drinking?
Yeah, this isn't easy to dissect, but it's necessary, isn't it? The first sign that I've gone too far. Well, I tend to become overly talkative and my filter kind of disappears. I start making jokes that are a bit too dry and potentially offensive. I guess I can also get a bit too honest, sharing things I normally wouldn't, and potentially hurting people's feelings in the process. It's like I get this false sense of confidence and end up disregarding the boundaries that I normally have in place. It's not a pleasant realization, honestly, but I think being aware of these signs is an important step in preventing myself from crossing that line in the future. It's all about catching myself before I get to that point, right?
How does it feel for you physically when you start permitting yourself to tell dry jokes? You know, the kind that might turn into something offensive.
Physically, it's kind of like I get this rush, a kind of adrenaline maybe, when I start going down that path. It feels exhilarating in the moment because I'm getting laughs and reactions from people. But deep down there is this little voice, a sort of nagging feeling in my stomach that tells me I'm walking on thin ice. I tend to ignore it, caught up in the moment. The laughter kind of drowns that voice out, I guess. It's like I become this bolder, uninhibited version of myself where I feel more alive momentarily. But yeah, there's always this undercurrent of anxiety, a tightness in my chest maybe, that signals that I might be going too far, even though at that point I usually choose to ignore it. It's a strange mix of excitement and foreboding, physically. It's complicated, I guess.
Now, I must say, it's really good, Leena, that you can detect that little voice deep down. For most people, that feeling of exhilaration and freedom, to be a little bit more loose, is a really liberating thing. And it certainly can be quite hard to decide that it's in fact the beginning of a negative consequence. What do you think about going out this week? Having a little alcohol, but stopping right at the moment when you feel yourself loosening up. Do you think that would be a difficult experience for you?
I can see the value in trying to find that sweet spot where I can enjoy myself without going too far. It sounds like a balanced approach, doesn't it? I do worry though, because once I start, it has been historically hard for me to stop at just that loosening up point. It's like opening Pandora's box, you know? But you're right, recognizing that moment and choosing to stop there could be a really healthy exercise in self-control. It would be a challenge, no doubt, but maybe it's a challenge worth taking on to help build better habits moving forward. I think I could give it a try, perhaps in a controlled environment, like at home with Patrick, where the risks are lower. It might be a good way to start redefining my relationship with alcohol by learning to enjoy it in moderation without crossing that line. It's a step, right? Maybe a small step, but in the right direction? What do you think?
I do think your willingness is really promising. I do have one concern, and that's that your first thought is to try this experiment with Patrick. I have noticed in the past that you see him as somewhat expendable, that you can try things out with him. If they don't work, it's fine because he'll forgive you. You do remember that instance where you covered him in fish batter when you had a bit too much to drink, and you didn't seem to feel as remorseful about that as you thought maybe you should be. I would prefer you try this experiment out with friends, you know, in a social setting. How would that make you feel?
Oh, yeah, the fish batter incident. That wasn't my proudest moment. I guess I felt like it was all in good fun, you know? But I do see what you mean. It's not fair to him to use him as a sort of testing ground, especially given the current dynamics between us. I need to be more considerate of his feelings, absolutely. Trying this out in a social setting does make me a bit nervous because there's more at stake, you know, potentially upsetting friends or making a scene. But I can also see how it would be a more genuine test of my self-control in a real-world scenario where I'm actually at risk of crossing those boundaries. I suppose if I let my friends know beforehand what I'm trying to achieve, it could create a supportive environment where they can help me stay on track. I'm feeling a little anxious about it, but I also see it as an opportunity for personal growth and to show myself and others that I can change. Yeah, it's a scary thought, but maybe it's a necessary step. I'm willing to give it a try, to really prove to myself that I can do this. What do you think? Would that be a good approach?
Now let's look at what's real here. You routinely have a social drink with friends, and it's only on rare occasions that things go badly. This would be a much simpler thing. I don't think you have anything to fear. I also want to say that I'm really impressed with your maturity. In the first response you gave there, I can see that you're making a lot of headway with your relationship to Patrick. When you first came to me, you complained that you were worried that he brought out the sociopath in you. It seems that you're finding it easier to consider his feelings. Now let's decide that you're going to do a social experiment with friends, possibly next Friday, and you tell me how it goes next week. Now, how does that sound?
You're right, I tend to exaggerate the negative outcomes sometimes, don't I? I appreciate your encouragement. It means a lot to hear that you see growth in how I'm handling my relationship with Patrick. I really am trying to be more mindful of his feelings, and I'm glad that's showing. Your suggestion sounds reasonable. Taking a measured approach, enjoying socializing without pushing it too far, it's something I want to be able to do. I do feel a little apprehensive, but also somewhat empowered to take control over my actions in that setting. Next Friday seems like a good time to give this a try. I'll go into it with a positive mindset, aiming to find that balance where I can enjoy myself without letting things go too far. And yes, I'm committed to sharing openly with you how it goes in our next session. Thank you for guiding me through this. Let's do it.
Yes, let's see how it goes. So, how are your evenings with Patrick these days?
Well, our evenings have been a bit hit or miss lately. Some days we really connect, have a nice dinner together, talk about our days, and just enjoy each other's company. On other days, it feels like we're just kind of going through the motions, stuck in routine without really connecting on a deeper level. I've been trying to be more present and attentive, trying to bring more warmth and connection into our evenings. But sometimes, I admit, I fall back into old patterns, brushing things off with humor or avoiding serious topics that probably need to be addressed. I am aware that I sometimes use humor as a defense mechanism, and I'm working on that, trying to be more open and vulnerable with Patrick. It's a work in progress, but I am hopeful that with time and conscious effort, we can foster a more intimate and understanding relationship. It's just, sometimes hard to break old habits, But yeah, I'm working on it. How does that sound to you?
Fine. Yes, good. And every relationship has its waves of proximity and distance. Now, what about your children?
Yes, the ups and downs are quite normal, aren't they? As for the children, Mark is still struggling a bit at school. It's hard to see him face these challenges, but we are in constant touch with his teachers trying to find the best way to support him. He's a bright kid, just has trouble focusing at times. We are exploring the possibility of him having ADHD and are in the process of getting a proper assessment. I feel a mix of worry and relief that we might finally get to the root of the issue. Beth Ann, on the other hand, is growing up so fast. She's seeking more independence, and while I want to encourage her to be her own person, it's a bit nerve-wracking to slowly let go. She's a smart and responsible girl, but the thought of her facing the world alone, even in small ways, can be quite daunting for a mother. It's a balancing act, giving her the freedom she needs while ensuring she remains safe. So, it's a bit of a challenging time, parenting-wise. I'm trying my best to navigate it with understanding and compassion, for them and for myself too. It's a continual learning process, isn't it? Do you have any insights or advice on this?
Now, it does indeed sound like you're very attentive to their needs, and that is great, Leena. Now, in this room, we focus on you, though. What do you need to maintain the level of energy needed to be a caregiver to your children?
You're right, focusing on my own needs is just as important. I have been trying to carve out some time for myself, to recharge and to engage in activities that I enjoy. Like, cycling has been a great outlet for me. It not only helps me stay fit but also gives me a chance to clear my mind and have some alone time. Working on my novel has also been a wonderful escape. It's a space where I can express myself freely, channeling my thoughts and emotions into my writing. It's still a work in progress, but it gives me a sense of purpose and joy. I've been considering going back to church as well. I feel like there is this spiritual void in my life currently, and I'm wondering if reconnecting with that community might help me find some of the fulfillment I've been missing. So, I guess what I need is to continue nurturing these aspects of my life that feed my soul and give me a sense of purpose outside of my role as a wife and a mother. It's about finding that balance, isn't it? Ensuring I have the energy and the mental space to care for my family while also taking care of myself. What do you think? Do you think I'm on the right track with this?
When we talk about balance, we often see something like a teeter-totter in our minds, which is really just an on-off switch. As you know, the real balance is when the teeter-totter has 10 arms with seats on them, and they are all balanced in the air. Some dip while others raise up high, and sometimes some of them bottom out but are lifted again by an opposite force across the fulcrum. What I'm really trying to say is, make sure there's an opposite for each stressor. Your novel could be the opposite for the stress of motherhood. Going to church could similarly be the opposite for another aspect. But with this one, you'd have to be more delicate. A religion isn't a touch-up solution. It's usually a full lifelong investment. I can't say I see it as being a benefit unless you've incorporated it fully into your life, and it works harmoniously with all of the other parts of your life.
I completely get what you're saying about the complex nature of balance in life. It's not as simple as just an on-off switch, but a dynamic equilibrium where different aspects of life constantly fluctuate, influencing and compensating for each other. As for the church aspect, I agree, it is indeed a significant commitment, not just a quick fix. It's something I have been pondering deeply because it involves not just a personal commitment but has implications for my family dynamics as well. I am considering exploring it for myself initially, to see if it resonates with me at this stage of my life, before bringing it into our family life. I have to admit, I am drawn to the sense of community and the spiritual nourishment it could potentially offer, and I am curious to see if it might fill that void I have been feeling inside. But I also understand that it's a delicate path, one that involves deep reflection and conscious choice. It's something I am still navigating, and I appreciate your insight, encouraging me to approach it with a thoughtful and measured perspective. It helps to talk it out and get a more rounded perspective on this. Do you have any other thoughts on this?
Well, no, but just keep the focus on maintaining what you need. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Unless you wanted to do that thing that we sometimes do, which is technically illegal, but oh so very enjoyable.
Oh, I do have a bit of a mischievous streak, but I think I'll have to pass on that for today. Keeping things straight and narrow, Thank you for today's session. It really helps to have these conversations and work through what's going on in my life with your guidance. I'll see you next week. Take care. Wait. Doctor?
Yes, Leena?
I do have an hour until I need to be home. Is the illegal activity that you just mentioned that we engage in from time to time still included in your regular fee?
Oh, Leena, you really can be naive sometimes, but you come by it so honestly. Nothing in life is really ever free.
You're right, Doctor. Nothing is free. And speaking of costs, I've been keeping a record of our, extracurricular activities on this recording device I have kept hidden in my purse. Just for my own peace of mind, of course.
Leena, what are you saying?
I'm saying, Doctor, that our sessions, and everything that comes with them, have just become a lot more expensive. See you next week. Tee hee.